Welcome, welcome everybody to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host, Trey Holiday. Welcome to our second show of the year so far. You guys know we do this as a team, and I can't do this without my teammate. That would be the one and only Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday. How are you?
Happy Tuesday. I'm feeling nice and sunny today. That's
well,
what
you look nice and sunny too.
Thank you.
You're bringing the sunshine to the set as usual.
You know it, man. I can't let you down.
Yeah, no. Man, great show lined up for today. We got Kevin Schofield joining us. There's some activity down there at the City Council legislation regarding police oversight and subpoena power, and talk a little bit about the SPUG contract. You know, there's no contract. The year expired. And there's no new contract, which sets in chain certain events and some everything else. We'll have Nikki Barron here talking about the coronavirus update. And before we do all that, though, we have to wish a very happy birthday to our director, Alia Di Alessandro.
Woo, woo.
Right? So Alia, this is good for her. She has a day off. Bobby Stills is filling in for her today. So any technical difficulties, blame it on the postman. But happy birthday to Alia. And you guys don't see her much on camera, but she's the one that actually directs the Morning Update show. It's good she's got a day off.
Yeah, no, happy birthday, Alia. And you guys have been hearing me say this ever since Nikki's birthday. Another Capricorn woman. Yes, happy birthday.
Another Capricorn woman, huh? All right. And speaking of that, you know, we had a great show last night. We did a live stream for my mom 75th birthday. Man, it was really dope. It was about an hour long. Lots of video, lots of greetings. You had a nice greeting that you recorded, a nice birthday which you recorded for my mom.
You know what? Your mom is like a mom to so many, honestly, in community. And I'm glad for those of you who tuned in to 11:50 a.m. on KKNW, the Mother's Justice Show. We had another great lineup there of amazing Capricorn women paying tribute and homage to the Reverend Harriet Walden. I'm so glad that she got a lot of love yesterday. She totally deserves it.
Kevin's in the chat. He said he just had a birthday 9 days ago, too.
A Capricorn man. There we go.
Yeah, we need some balance around here. You know, short clip from last night's live stream. You see, because the archivist. Yeah, we already know you got the stamp on it. All right. So you want to look right over there into that monitor, and we're bringing in Patricia Valentine, who's muted right now. You got to unmute yourself, Patricia.
Thank you.
There you go.
Happy Earth Day, happy solar return. And I just have to do this. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday.
Jamming last night.
Oh my gosh, man. Frank and Patricia, man, another couple in the CD. I love them both. So, I mean, your mom is loved, man. Seriously.
Lots of love. Definitely lots of love out there. Man, you know, we'll see what the results are today. But people in Georgia, they're going to the poll to elect 2 senators. And we actually have some clips on that in another segment of the show. But, you know, that's the big news on the political land front today. Yeah. Is this Georgia vote. We'll see how that comes out. We got some clips. And D.C., man, it's going to be a lot of tension on D.C. Tomorrow. Then also just a programming note, a heads up, is that, you know, we did the historic town hall back, I believe, it was the first week of October. We had Mayor Durkin, we had Nikita Oliver, King County Equity Now, Sean Good, Black Trans Task Force, Council Member Zahalai, School Board Director Hersey, and now we're getting ready to do follow-ups with everybody. We're like, well, this is what we were saying in October, and so what's going on now? And so first up is actually we're talking to Mayor Durkin tomorrow, myself and Besa. And then we're going to go back through the list of everybody there. So it'll be interesting when talking to Nikita Oliver about, man, well, what, you know, where's things at defund and the things they were pushing from October to now. Be good to talk to KY King Garrett, you know, as to what he was talking about in African Town Community Land Trust back in October to now. Sean Good and quite Amijah Smith. It was quite a few people we talked to. And I can't wait to check in as well with Councilmember Zahala. You know, he put out like a 6-minute video the other day. It was like, I want to tell everybody this is what we've been doing, this is where we're with it, and everything else. And also School Board Director Hersey. I mean, that's a rough road over there in the school district, considering COVID, everything else, the superintendent's leaving. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be checking back in with everybody that we talk to from the historic town hall. You know, Converge. We like to follow up where we can.
You know what? And that's really what it's about, because so many people, again, get educated through the platform. So you don't ever want to start something we can't finish. We need to keep those follow-ups. And we know a lot of these stories, honestly, are continual as people make adjustments, have to make changes. So it's great that the community can be informed.
All right. So we were running around here yesterday trying to get everything together for this birthday party last night. And I came across this on Twitter. They were busy down in City Hall. Lisa Herbold. The original tweet: council unanimously voted in favor of legislation that will strengthen subpoena power of the OPA and the Office of Inspector General. And saying Lisa Herbold said, keep us on the path to realizing true accountability and transparency. And then Lisa Herbold, Councilmember Herbold, jumped on top of that and said, for our civilian-led police accountability system to work, investigators must have access to key information in pursuing misconduct complaints. This legislation codifies and affirms the city's stance that OPA and OIG can seek subpoena when investigating those incidents. So now, at this time, I'd like to bring in Kevin Schofield. What's up, Kevin?
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. Okay, Kevin, so what's going on?
Yeah, so the city council just passed an ordinance that they started working on in early December that expands and sort of clarifies the subpoena power for the OPA, the Office of Professional Accountability, and for the Inspector General for Public Safety. And you know, there some aspects of this that were written but not very well under the original police accountability legislation that was passed 3 years ago. And this is kind of just sort of fixing up some things, clarifying some of the aspects of it, making sure it was clear, you know, who exactly they could and could not subpoena to get rights, to get records when they're doing an investigation of police misconduct. But the other thing it does is it makes very clear, in fact, you know, requires somebody who gets a notice and a subpoena from the OPA or the Inspector General to receive a notice that specifies what their due process rights are, so that, you know, they know that they can contest the subpoena in court, and you know, all of their First Amendment and Fifth Amendment rights, you know, against self-incrimination apply to this, and that any information that's collected by the OPA or the Inspector General can't be used in another criminal proceeding without a separate search warrant or court order, right? So anything they get as a subpoena as part of investigation, you know, through the OPA can only be used for that investigation. It can't be used for anything else unless there's a separate search warrant or court order on that, right? So that's sort of the heart of what this legislation does. Now, there are a couple catches to this, right?
Yeah.
One is that Judge Robart, who oversees the SPD consent decree, has to approve this, because it changes the police accountability legislation, which he still hasn't approved yet, right? But because it relates to police accountability, in the end, he's going to have to approve it, and the city is going to have to submit it to him for his approval. And honestly, right now, he's not going to approve it for the same reason he still hasn't approved the original police accountability legislation, which is that it's subject to collective bargaining. In fact, this new ordinance they just passed on the subpoena power explicitly says in it that there are aspects of it related to collective bargaining, and the key ones are can the OPA and the Inspector General subpoena information from a police officer's family members, right? That's a key question, and there are actually terms in the last police contract that relate to that, but at the end of the day, the city and SPOG, the police union, said, we're going to leave those for further negotiation, and the city's going to agree not to implement them. So at this point, as it stands right now, OPA and the Inspector General, you know, to the extent they have subpoena power, it's really kind of undefined at this point, because sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, okay. So a few things there. One, on this subpoena, what powers does OPA and the OIG currently have? And then two, when you talk about this now involving the union and collective bargaining, I read somewhere, I might have it wrong, that like the rank and file officers are in one union and the command staff in another union, and the command staff is like, yeah, okay, whatever. But the SPOG and the rank and file officers are kind of against this subpoena power.
Yeah, so let's take those one at a time. So your first question was around what subpoena power do they have right now, and most of their subpoena power is, there's things in the contract that say very clearly that the police officers and SPD, including individual police officers, are required to hand over information to OPA and Inspector General when they're doing investigations. If they refuse to do that, or the information isn't forthcoming, then they can subpoena that information, right? That's what it says right now. But it's not clear to what extent, if any, they can't. That right now they have the rights to subpoena friends and family members and other associates of police officers to try to get broader information about what's going on. And that's part of what this ordinance is supposed to clean up. So now, in terms of the contract, there are in fact two unions that represent police officers, right? So there is one union, SPOG, which represents the frontline officers, and then there's another one called SPMA, the Seattle Police Management Association, which represents the sergeants and lieutenants, right? And then sort of captains and above don't have union representation at all, right? But there's one for kind of the supervisors, that's SPMA, and there's one for the frontline officers, and that's SPOG. And SPMA generally has been pretty amenable to contracts. SPOG is the one who's really fought tooth and nail on a lot of these things. In fact, right now, the frontline police officers, as of last week, are now operating without a contract again, because their last contract, which was signed in 2018, just expired at the end of December 31st, 2020. So they're without a contract. Now, what that means is, for the most part, very little, because under the terms of the last contract, most of the terms, all the rules around behavior and all that stuff carry forward until there's a new contract. But the one thing that doesn't carry forward is any pay raises. So the police officers, frontline police officers, don't get any more pay raises until there's a new contract. They still have to follow all the other terms of the contract that just expired, but they don't get any pay raises.
Okay, so my question then, Kevin, is, in terms of how this affects, regular community members with regard to, police accountability and the police force, with SPOG, does this mean that there are now contract negotiations that take place with SPOG, or is there another entity that could kind of take place over the union for those police officers that are more on the ground?
Yeah, so in fact, the city, there's all sorts of rules under state and local law for how these kinds of public service employee negotiations have to go on. And, one of them is that the city has to announce like 6 months in advance that they're about to start a new round of contract negotiations, so that there are opportunities for the public to weigh in. And they made that announcement, actually, it was kind of late spring, so a little over 6 months ago. And there were some public hearings around this in the fall. Though they weren't terribly well advertised in some cases. So now the city is really gearing up to start this next round of negotiations with SPOG on this. And there were some interesting announcements last month by the mayor and by Councilmember Herbold around this, that you can see they're starting to sort of try to build a coalition around holding SPOG, kind of reducing some of their political capital. So there was an announcement last month saying that for the first time, OPA, the Inspector General, and the CPC are all going to have a formal role in the negotiations, and that the City Council will actually have one of their staff members sitting at the table during the negotiations. And they didn't rule out OPA, Inspector General, or CPC actually having somebody sit at the table. They said that's kind of still to be determined who is literally sitting at the table across from SPOG. But But there's going to be a very formal role for the first time in these negotiations. It's a complicated sort of mess. What happens is there is this for the city. There's a labor relations policy committee, it's got 4 city council members on it and 4 members of the executive branch who are basically setting the overall policy and for the city as to what's acceptable or not acceptable in a contract like this one, or with any of the other unions that represent city employees. And then there's a set of negotiators who actually sit at the table and negotiate and try to hammer out a deal over these things.
Yeah, it seems like this is always a tenuous process here when it's negotiations between SPOG and the city with this contract. I mean, it's a lot of things to unpack here.
There is.
Probably do a whole show on this.
Yeah.
I mean, also, like when you talk about OPA and you talk about SPOG, I mean, Mike Solon, I think it was a report that King 5 did. He told him, he's like, man, I'm not worried about OPA. He represents the union. So he represents the rank and file officer. Like, how worried about the OPA or the rank and file officers if the president of the union said that he's not too worried about it? I mean, we see it seems like a victory. This is the thing is when it comes to these police issues here, there's always something where the city council is kind of like, hey, this is a victory for whatever. And then it gets in front of a federal judge, it gets slapped down. We saw the tear gas ban. They were like, man, this is a great day for the city of Seattle. We're banning tear gas. We're banning this and that. And got in front of the federal judge. The federal judge slapped it down. There's been quite a few other things there. I mean, what do you think that Judge Robart, when he finally does make a decision on these kind of things, this is something that he's going to find acceptable underneath the consent decree?
Well, I think he will definitely like these new terms for the subpoena power. No doubt around that. And you're right. The city has a lot of constraints they have to work with, and a lot of that comes from state law, right? Because state law has some very specific protections for public employees and their ability to collective bargain. Police officers are not allowed to strike under state law, right? And in return for that, for not being able to strike, because that could easily be abused by local governments, right? In return for that, the state law guarantees them some very specific rights. One of those, and this is one that's really been the most controversial in a lot of ways, is the right to arbitration. So if there is a disciplinary, action taken against a police officer that officers, or the union disagree with, they have the right to go to arbitration over that. Now, what form exactly arbitration takes, is a little bit under debate, but this is, the SPOG has been very clear about what they think arbitration means and the rights that gives them. And they've, insisted on setting up this system where they can do a little bit of forum shopping. They can, say, well, I want this kind of arbitration, or I want to go to the public service, oversight boards to do a different kind of arbitration. So they've really been kind of playing these different versions off each other so they can find the forum that gives them, the best result if they actually want to, appeal or challenge a disciplinary, procedure. Now, what the city council and the mayor are trying to do now is, we've got just in a couple of weeks a legislative session starting in Olympia.
Right.
And they've pushed really hard, right at the top of their legislative agenda is to get some changes made in these state laws so that the city has more leverage in these negotiations, right?
Right, and that's one of the things here. And so the legislature comes back in next week on January 11th, and a lot of people, I guess, if you've been following this story has really gone from the streets to City Hall and now to the state legislature, because the state legislature, they're taking up things like this collective bargaining, or talk about that, but also tactics when people can pull out armored personnel carriers or use tear gas, decertification, statewide registry. There's all kinds of different things that are happening down in Olympia. And I do know this, and actually I'm gonna talk to Mayor Durkin about this tomorrow when I talk to her, is the mayor and a lot of people here in the city they've sent a lot of letters and made it very vocal that they actually want to see changes in policing in the state legislature, because there's really so much that any municipality can do.
That's right. They are constrained, right? They can't. The SPOG can decide to bargain away, to trade off their arbitration rights for something else that they want, some other concession they want in the contract. But the city can't force them to give up arbitration, right? They're guaranteed that under state law, right? So as long as they have that written into state law, the city's hands are tied in the kinds of police accountability system they can set up. And there's other laws that specify other parts. So just getting a bunch of cleanup in that, could potentially significantly change the balance of power in this next round of contract negotiations.
I'll tell you something that's real interesting. I'm hearing grumblings on. I need to go and talk to a few more people. But you know what's real interesting is that SPOG was kicked out of the Labor Council, right? I think we have like one of the biggest labor council to that type of organization in America. However, many of the unions who voted to kick SPOG out are quietly supporting SPOG in the background because they don't want these changes in labor union contracts to happen at the state level. So, it'll be interesting to see what unions placated to the public of like, oh, we're kicking SPOG out. They're not representative of whatever. They're not blah, blah, blah. They're not whatever. Who now behind the scenes, because the thing is labor unions get a lot of these people in office in the legislature. It's the unions who are getting behind them. It's the unions phone calling for them. It's the unions
and city council and city council.
Right. And so it's going to be interesting to see if unions now behind the scenes backdoor come to the defense of SPOG by pressuring legislators in Olympia to vote against any legislation that it changes collective bargaining.
And a big one there on that list is going to be the firefighters union, right? Because they're also, first responders, public servants, and all the rules that apply to the police department in state law about their collective bargaining rights and their, that they can't strike and all these things. All those apply to the firefighters as well. Some of them apply to other public service employees, but they definitely all apply to fires union. And the firefighters unions, here in Seattle, in Washington, and nationwide, tend to be very politically powerful, right? They're good at fundraising. They're good at sort of pushing through kind of their agenda. So they're going to be a one to watch on this.
Yeah, I also want to watch some of these other people. I mean, the vote was kind of overwhelming of all the different unions that voted to kick SPOG out of the Labor Council. So it would be interesting to kind of poll them and see what their position is on the, because it's one thing to go out in public. There was a big rally there at Cal Anderson Park. All the unions are kicking SPOG out and everything else. So it'll be interesting to see where the different unions come down on this subject. So Kevin, another thing we want to talk to you while we have you here is this feedback that, long slide, where is it at here? We've got feedback from SPD Blotter. Here we go. SPD seeks community feedback on draft use of force and crowd management policies. And I know that they want this information in. This closes on the 8th in like 3 days. So that's why we wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah, so this is through the kind of late fall into early December. SPD has been circulating a set of potential changes to their crowd control weapons policies and to their use of their use of force policies. And they circulated first quietly to OPA, to the CPC, to the Inspector General. And this is sort of like their standard practice is kind of do this stuff quietly and try to get feedback. And they sent it out to all those three, asking them all to give them feedback by January 8th. And then, they would try to sort of pull all that together into, one larger conversation once they got the individual feedback from them. So, I did a public records request and got copies of these and posted them. And quite honestly, SPD found out that I and one other local journalist had them and were about to post them. And so they posted them themselves and along with that posted a web form so you could go and submit feedback if you wanted. So they told me in the last couple of weeks that they're getting a fair amount of feedback from individual citizens on these policies. There's some interesting stuff in there and related to not only use of blast balls and other, crowd control weapons that we've seen, but also, some potentially new weapons that they want to, quote unquote, less lethal weapons that they want to introduce into their toolbox on this stuff. And the crowd control weapons is an interesting part because that section was written in after the consent decree was signed as an alternative, forcing SPD to have alternative tools and weapons to use that are, as they say, less lethal than guns and batons, right? Having a set of things that they're required to have and carry and be trained on that aren't as lethal as a gun. But at the end, as it's turned out, not only are they still very clearly lethal in some circumstances, but their ability to use them with discretion does not seem to be great in a lot of circumstances, right? So there's lots of very serious questions about have they found the right balance between using these? But on the other hand, the accountability organizations, particularly the OPA and the Inspector General, have said, just broadly outlawing all these puts us right back to where we were before the consent decree, where they've got guns and batons and that's it, right? So there's this hard conversation that we need to have around what are the tools that we really want them to have, and which ones do we want to force police officers to carry that are their preferred alternatives before they pull out the lethal force on this. And it's tough, right? Because particularly for things like blast balls, and blast balls is really a key issue that's going to keep coming up over and over again, because the CPC has been clear for several years now that they think they're just inappropriate, and they're hard. They're very difficult to use in the way that SPD intends to use them.
My friend, as someone who's had the blast ball, and you're never supposed to throw them towards somebody's head, but somebody who's had a blast ball explode next to my head and you lose your hearing for a while, it's crazy. I would say this is that the 8th is the last day, so we'll do the Seattle Police Department a favor and publicize this, make it even more public here. You can go to the Seattle Police Department's website or to the SPD blotter and take that survey. And, for people who have been on the other end of Seattle Police Department crowd control, or people, one of the things the Seattle Police Department talks about is vicarious trauma. They talk about some of the people who work in SPD, they follow up on cases and they're vicariously traumatized. So I'd say that as well to our viewing audience. You might not necessarily have been out there and been impacted directly through crowd control, but vicariously through watching the stream. If you have input on how you'd like to see the Seattle Police Department better deal with crowd management, because vicarious trauma impacts everybody, and impacts officers, so that's why that one clip had like 12,000 complaints on it with the child being pepper sprayed. It was only a few people who were physically there, but so many people were impacted vicariously by seeing that literally 12,000 people filed a complaint against it. So we really want people to get involved.
Well, I also think too that, when there are opportunities for folks to be talking about their experiences and actually give some suggestions, I think this is the time. I'm glad that we are going to be publicizing it because, a lot of folks don't know. And as you just said, Kevin, you and another reporter were going to be putting it out there than they did themselves. But I think that it reaches different audiences when different people actually expose these things. And ultimately, there is a need for community voice to be heard in these matters. So I'm glad that there's at least a survey going around to do that, because I know that, like you said, when I think about the woman where the blast ball was thrown right at her, right towards her, again, I wasn't there, but to see that, I'm going, wait a minute, what can I do as a citizen to say I don't agree with those tactics? And so it sounds like the survey to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I'd say, Trey, I totally agree with everything you said there. Just two quick points on this. One is that the CPC, the questions they've been asking, last month around this are, is surveys enough? Right? They really think there needs to be a public conversation. They want to partner with either SPD or the city council to hold public forums on this and really have a conversation about what should be our city's policy on this stuff. And I think that there's a lot to be said for going that direction right there. Let's not just have a place up there where people can type in some comments and send them off to SPD. But let's really have a conversation, a back and forth conversation about this. And the other.
Go ahead. Sorry, Kevin.
And the other thing is kind of a technical point here. People may have trouble finding the survey. So what SPD did is, rather than sort of post a survey up at the top, they posted the different sort of documents that have the proposed changes, and the link to the survey is at the end of those documents. So open up a document, read through the changes, and the link. It's not what I would have done. It took me a while I had to go back and forth because I couldn't find the links to the survey either.
So maybe we'll help out the SPD, and later on today we'll make sure and tweet out that link across all of our different Converge platforms and put it up there. Hey, we got to run, Kevin Schofield, man. Appreciate you taking time.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.
Always a lot of information with Kevin.
Yeah, and really so informative, honestly, because again, I didn't know about the survey, and sometimes you don't have time to read these articles. I also like too what he was saying there about those community conversations, because also we know that surveys don't reach the mass amount of public. I mean, we still have people that have technology issues, access to internet, all of those things are still a factor.
Here's the thing is what he's saying too is this: the CPC. So the SPD wants you to do the written survey. The CPC is like, nah, man, we need to talk about this. And speaking of talking about, I'm actually doing an interview with the Inspector General, Lisa Judge. I'll be talking to Lisa Judge here sometime this week, and they're doing what's called a Sentinel event review. And basically what they want conversation from community about this Sentinel event that happened here this summer in the Seattle protest. So, like I said, when we're on top of it, this is something we're on top of. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we got the national headlines. There's a lot of stuff going on in Washington, D.C. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
My parents coming over here as refugees meant that they didn't really have anything when they came to America. Having reliable healthcare and having a reliable doctor was really important. Gongdong kutoy, jam ite kutoy.
我的社区，我的诊所。Mi comunidad, mi clínica.
Bulshada iyo bakaraha.
My community, my clinic.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your man, the Big O. Want to take a moment here, first of all, to say thank you for your support of Converge Media. We definitely wouldn't be here without you. Secondly, I want to thank everybody who is a supporter of Converge Media on Patreon. We definitely appreciate your support. And for those of you might not know, I'll let you know, we operate 100% off of donations. Some donations big, most donations small, but we love all donations all the same. If you haven't done so yet, I want to encourage you to go on our website to whereweconverge.com/donate and subscribe. You click on the Patreon link and you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month. There's higher tiers beyond that as well. And just know that your subscription literally keeps us on the air. Once again, I want to thank you for all your support.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Morning Update Show. That was a great first segment with Kevin Schofield. And as O said, we got to get into these national headlines, my friend.
Yeah, and before we do that, I would just point that out. It's important. I think this is a role that we play here in our community. It's taking this information that comes out of City Hall and kind of breaking it down so people can understand, what's going on. Yeah. And definitely want to encourage people. And like I said, we'll tweet out these links later on here today to this survey or this feedback form the Seattle Police Department has. It closes on the 8th. So you definitely want to get your feedback in there. All right. So on the national front, like we talked about today, is they're voting as we speak down in Georgia. We'll know, I guess, by the end of the day, what things are going to be looking like here, at least for the next few years in the Senate. But this first story here, I think this is CBS this morning, and it talks about President Trump's pressure campaign coming up to the certification of the vote on Wednesday.
And in Washington, President Trump's attempts to hold on to power are driving a wedge into and possibly through the Republican Party. There is a widening rift between lawmakers over a plan to challenge the Electoral College vote tomorrow, normally a day of pomp and ceremony. Nancy Cordes has been covering all of it on Capitol Hill for us. Nancy, good morning to you.
Good morning. Tensions are definitely rising ahead of this certification clash tomorrow. One of the leaders of the challenge effort, Missouri's Josh Hawley, says that protesters showed up at his Virginia home and threatened his family. Protest organizers deny that that happened. And so clearly there's a lot of drama surrounding a process that's normally a formality.
This is about the integrity of our elections.
Missouri Senator Josh Hawley cheered on a growing movement last night. Republicans who plan to contest the results tomorrow without evidence of fraud.
I believe there are serious questions with respect to the presidential election.
Despite attempts by Senate Leader Mitch McConnell to talk them out of it, at least 13 GOP senators have joined the cause, including Georgia's Kelly Loeffler, who spoke last night at a rally with the president on the eve of her special election.
I will object to the Electoral College vote.
The effort has dismayed some Republicans, like Ohio's Rob Portman, who noted that not a single state found evidence of fraud or irregularities widespread enough to change the result of the election. Another Republican, West Virginia's Shelley Moore Capito, warned that refusing to count a state's electoral votes in the absence of such evidence would disenfranchise millions of American voters. Kevin Kramer of North Dakota agreed.
I come from a red, small state. I don't want to have our votes overturned by other members of Congress from other places. I don't see in the Constitution where we even actually have that authority, quite honestly.
But President Trump slammed Republicans like him yesterday, dubbing them the Surrender Caucus.
People will remember the people that don't support us.
He even upped the pressure on his own vice president, who will preside over tomorrow's joint session of Congress.
I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much.
Mr. Pence made it clear he won't disappoint.
We'll have our day in Congress. We'll hear the objections. We'll hear the evidence.
But Vice President-elect Kamala Harris argued none of it will change the outcome.
Let me just tell you something. We're going to be inaugurated, period.
I know you're going to be inaugurated, but when you see what...
Here in Washington, more than 300 National Guard members have now been activated ahead of expected pro-Trump rallies tomorrow. And all D.C. police officers will be on duty as well because they're anticipating tens of thousands of people in the streets. Anthony?
Nancy, thank you.
All right. So you see there. Now, tomorrow is going to get funky in Washington, D.C. I'll tell you right now, like I said right there, we got another clip. We get ready to play it from Washington, D.C. station. The mayor has already called out his 300 National Guardsmen that'll be on the streets. They're trying to seal off Black Lives Matter Plaza. The head of the Proud Boys was arrested, and that's the clip we're going to play here. He was arrested. You remember we showed that clip a few weeks ago where members of the Proud Boys, they went to that black church there in Washington, D.C., and they ripped the Black Lives Matter sign from the church and they set it on fire. Well, a warrant was issued at that time. And so when he landed in Washington, D.C., they arrested him, but then they also found some high capacity magazines basically for gun. And, you know, guns are illegal in Washington, D.C. But here's the latest coming out the nation's capital.
Off the top at 10, the leader of the far-right group, the Proud Boys, arrested in the district, and he's being held by police. Enrique Tarrio is accused of burning a Black Lives Matter banner stolen from an historic black church.
That was last month during protests in support of President Trump, and today Tarrio was returning for the next round of protests that start tomorrow. Fox 5's Lindsay Watts is live with the latest on the arrest and how the city's preparing for these protests. Lindsay.
Angie and Jim, tonight police are already blocking streets around the White House, and they are also in front of some D.C. churches. You can see there are a few officers down here in front of Metropolitan AME, which is just a few blocks from the White House. And this was one of the churches that had a Black Lives Matter banner stolen during the protest last month. We'll show you some video. The Proud Boys also burned a banner from another D.C. black church, Asbury United Methodist. Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio has admitted to his role in that on social media, and today police arrested him as he came into D.C. from Miami. He is charged with destruction of property, which is a misdemeanor, but police say he had 2 high-capacity magazines with him, so he's facing another charge for that, and he remains in jail tonight. And it fuels concerns that we have been talking about, that protesters will be armed and ready to defy D.C. law that says you can't have guns anywhere near protests or on the National Mall. We got news of Tarrio's arrest the same day we found out that Metropolitan AME is suing him and the Proud Boys, accusing them of terrorizing their church.
The attack on the Metropolitan AME Church, one of our most storied and historic houses of worship inside the nation's capital, a historic Black church, is a sacred place. And the Proud Boys' decision to intentionally target this church and rip their Black Lives Matter sign down, while also targeting other houses of worship, really makes this a dangerous and toxic kind of attack that we need not tolerate in our democracy today.
D.C. police want to make sure we don't see any kind of vandalism at these churches again. While the biggest protests are planned for Wednesday, when Congress meets to certify the presidential electoral votes, there are also events happening tomorrow. The National Guard will be assisting police over the next 2 days. We saw police again already in position, blocking streets around the White House. Some of those streets are shut down, and businesses have boarded up tonight. The city's brand new police chief, Robert Conti, says he is prepared to shut down Black Lives Matter Plaza if need be. There is a real concern about potential violence.
I'm calling on the public, people who will be peacefully assembling. If you see anyone carrying a firearm or concealing a firearm, to please reach out to the Metropolitan Police Department.
The overall message from D.C. leaders is stay home. The local chapter of Black Lives Matter is not planning any counter protests. Back to you.
This is really interesting because honestly, I mean, it almost sounded like either way there may be some kind of funk,
it's gonna get funky.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, there's no real denying that. Oh, and again, I mean, this is part of this larger issue. I mean, of folks getting out there in the streets saying their piece. We're not going to see this end, man.
You know what's interesting is that things have gone on long enough, but in a short enough time span that we're getting ready to see like some real interesting dynamics, right? Because if you've been following, we got a clip here from Salem, Oregon. A lot of the people who were on the sidelines saying Blue Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. Now they're out there protesting. You'll see a lot of the Proud Boys protested, and they're like, man, we need to defund you guys, because the police are sitting there and they're tear gassing and pepper spraying and flash banging Proud Boys and patriots, and you hear them now, and they're saying that it's crazy. So you got the people who like the direct action guys, and you got the Proud Boys both saying we need to defund the police, because it's eye-opening, because a lot of people who came out and protested in Seattle, you have an expectation, and they're like, man, the police aren't going to be here for us. They've never considered the police to be their ally. Yeah. But you got a whole new group of people who've always considered the police to be their ally, who now they're out there in the streets and the police are putting them things on them. This is out of Salem, Oregon last week. So Trey Holiday, like I said, what we see now is now you got a whole, people go to the streets for what they're impassioned about.
Yes.
We saw all these people go to the streets because they were impassioned about the crime against humanity with George Floyd, right? Now you got a whole nother group of people going to the streets because they're impassioned about a lockdown or they're impassioned about the way the vote went. But now they're in the streets. Yeah. And so, you know, it's going to be real interesting. Like it's so many clips. We're real pissed about it. So many funny clips. I find it funny because it's just the shock of people. It was a week ago when, or maybe 2 weeks ago at the most, where a group vandalized the Capitol down there in Salem. Man, they kicked in the doors and everything. Man, they challenged the state police down there. They're like, we need to defund you guys and everything else. And so I didn't think, at least in such a short time span, that you really got people here, you know, in the streets of America, especially in Washington State and in Oregon, that are on the streets. They're like, man, defund SPD, or defund police. And you got a whole nother element, I guess you would consider to the far right, who are now out there and they tasting some of that tear gas and some of everything else. Yep. And they're shocked. They're like, man, you're supposed to be working for us.
Well, it makes them change their tune. That's for sure. Because one thing is clear. There is always been this difference between the us versus them mentality. We've heard retired police talk about this, folks that have left the police force. We saw this. And honestly, a lot of the protesters that were out there felt this. It doesn't matter what you're out in the streets for. It's almost as if there is a force that is trying to stop your freedom of speech and your right to gather in a protest type of situation. So it doesn't matter what you're out there for. Protester is a protester, right? And unfortunately, it begins to look like, okay, you're ready to destroy property for your cause. You're destroying property for your cause. At the end of the day, the issues is not really what matters to that police force. They just see you as opposition.
It's just interesting that probably a lot of the same people who saw protesters here in Portland breaking out windows, businesses, and were like, man, you know, these guys, they're destroying property. And then flip, it's a whole nother group who's breaking out the windows down there in the state capitol, down there in Oregon and everything else. I tell you, man, it's all games, man. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we got a real quick coronavirus update with Nikki Barron, and then we got some real positive stuff we're going to talk about. You are watching the Morning Update Show. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your man, the Big O. Want to take a moment here, first of all, to say thank you for your support of Converge Media. We definitely wouldn't be here without you. Secondly, I want to thank everybody who is a supporter of Converge Media on Patreon. We definitely appreciate your support. And for those of you might not know, I'll let you know, we operate 100% off of donations. Some donations big, most donations small, but we love all donations all the same. If you haven't done so yet, I want to encourage you to go on our website to whereweconverge.com/donate and subscribe. You click on the Patreon link and you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month. There's higher tiers beyond that as well. And just know that your subscription literally keeps us on the air. Once again, I want to thank you for all your support. Welcome back to the Morning Update Show. It's time to bring in producer Nikki Barron. What's up, Nikki?
Hey, good morning.
All right. We went along with Kevin Schofield, but I think that was important information. So we're nearing the top of the hour here, but we definitely didn't want to skip over the numbers for today. So maybe we can jump right into them.
Let's do that. Okay, so our numbers, our confirmed cases rose by 995, bringing us to a total of 246,376. Our hospitalizations rose to 15,160. And the death rate has totaled out at 3,482 so far in the state of Washington. We're sitting at an 82.1 in terms of our hospital readiness. So essentially that's how many ICU beds do we have filled. That was really alarming yesterday because we were at about 86, dropped down a little bit. The goal is to keep it under 80. And then lastly, our positivity rate right now is sitting at 9.4%. And the goal for that is actually 2%. So we're doing pretty poor when it comes to that positivity rate. And those are your numbers.
All right, and real quick, 6:15 on Wednesday. What can we expect?
So I'm still trying to confirm my guest. We haven't gotten the final okay, but it's going to be good because it's Converge. And our episode last night, which you can find at whereweconverge.com, just navigate over to our COVID resources page. I did a level set for the year, and I gave an update on where we're at with the new variant, where we're at with the coronavirus vaccine, as well as the federal aid bill that just came out of Congress. So be sure to check that out.
All right. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
Nikki's such an overachiever.
I love it, man. You know it, Capricorn woman, man. I mean, she goes hard.
Yeah, man. So I got one or two things I wanted to, because I skipped over earlier. We were talking about it. I think it's important here. One thing was, this is actually, I guess, some good news. Let me find it here.
Yes, bring us the good news.
Well, I'm usually so well put together here. So there was an Amber Alert that happened yesterday, and everybody saw the Amber Alert. It says Yakima teen found after Amber Alert, police say. And this is crazy. 50-year-old girl who was subject to Amber Alert has been located. Yakima police say law enforcement officers in Nevada stopped the male suspect vehicle, and the juvenile was recovered safely. It said the girl had stepped out to take out the trash at 11:20 a.m. and did not return, according to State Patrol. Her family was home when she disappeared. Detectives believe she might have been kidnapped by a man who recently coerced her via social media and took her to Arizona for a month. She was found and taken back to Washington in November. Wow. Man, that's crazy. Wow. I mean, I'm glad that she's back home, but I'll tell you something right there.
Well, absolutely. We've been seeing abuse of power on social media as many people are at home. Kids are online doing school. It actually has more access, in terms of predatory practice. There is more access for predators out there. And that's really alarming and scary. I think a lot of us, when we hear these Amber Alerts on our phone, we don't always get the actual cases, right? So Thank you for that update, because it was going off on all our phones yesterday.
Yeah, it would be good for the Amber Alert people too if you send like a follow-up. Like, hey, we found the person, so we follow up on that. Here was something else that I skipped over. I want to bring this up. There's an article here in the Crosscut, and it's by Duji Tahat. And it says the problem with Seattle's progressive chattering class. And Crosscut be going hard on a lot of stuff, man. So this is it's an article here. Go check that out here, the Crosscut. But I'll just read one part of it. Today's, and actually the subline here is, political advocacy organizations could learn from our city's long tradition of organizing and occupation. And it says today's political advocacy organizations represent the chattering class. They're socially concerned, well-educated, and predominantly white. They hold substantial political power. And as the industry of advocacy, fill the ever-widening chasm between the mayor's office and the people on the street. People on the street demanding justice. This network holds enormous influence in deciding what policies are taken up for consideration, and it's fundraising off this moment, making shrewd considerations about how to leverage collective unrest to generate revenue. These organizations exist precisely because racial injustice exists. To reckon with racial injustice for a progressive nonprofit, think tank, or philanthropic organization is to reckon with rendering itself obsolete. And so this article, Ray Holiday.
Hey, you know, all I'm saying is absolutely. Okay. You know, that is what we've seen on the street. And I think that so many more people are beginning to be educated and informed on the powers that be that are pulling strings behind the scenes. And that reporter is right when he talks about the political power that a lot of these groups have, a lot of those folks have, because they really do. I mean, they get together. We talk about certain folks. When I start thinking about other committees of power, this is where a lot of people are, right? When we talk about the Downtown Association, when we talk about certain committees that are over levy funds in the city or through the county, we've seen this before. And honestly, I'm glad more and more people are waking up. Oh,
you know what's interesting about this though is in here in this article here in the Crosscut, or this opinion here in the Crosscut, the problem with Seattle's progressive chattering class. It says that this chattering class is filling the void in between City Hall and the streets. And what we've been saying here for months, Seattle has a leadership vacuum. And so until there's a leadership class, we got the chattering class, until there's a leadership class here, then it leaves that void. And whoever comes into the space, they fit into the space. And that's kind of what we've seen here over the last 6 months and following the Seattle protests and some of everything else, is that leadership void needs to get filled by people who aren't special interests, people who really just want to see a better city. And, you know, it's a challenge for us here in the Emerald City.
Yeah, I know, because I think it gets splintered. Even when I think about myself, you know, I hear us talk about leaders, and I was like, man, you know, I had kids. I wasn't in the CHOP every day. Sometimes I regret that, because I'm like, man, I am passionate about our city just doing better. And honestly, I know Seattle can lead. I know that we are already leading on a national scale when it comes to how we have brought organizations together to fight for common causes, when it comes to us actually putting pressure on city council, on our governor, on the legislators that are in the county council. All of that has really been a movement of the people. And ultimately, when you go to other cities throughout the nation, you don't see that kind of collectivism or a kind of authority where people are like, no, we need to get together. And for me, coming back from Atlanta and hearing from Kamal Franklin, who is the executive director of Community Movement Builders out there, I really was expecting to learn so much, but it was great to actually benefit each other in that way, because Seattle is doing a great job in terms of the ground game. But I think you're right when it comes to the leaders, man. I don't know, man. People, man. You know, I might have to step up. Oh, I don't know.
We got a comment here. Seattle progressives are liberal racists. And you know, I mean, we had to clap back a long time ago, months ago, when we had these people who aren't from our community who were telling us what news that we could air for the Black community. Right. Like, why are you guys talking about this story? Well, our community wants to know about it. Why would they want to know about that? They should just know it's bad. You be like, man, you know, I mean, we get it's crazy, because, you know, in the comments, especially our political shows, we get a lot of people that you would say are right wing or right leaning and everything else. And we don't never get them telling us what we shouldn't be airing. You know what I'm saying? They always got something, BLM, whatever. That's, you know, that's their thing. But I've never had like the right wingers say like, why are you guys doing this story? Black people don't need to know about that. It's always the left, man. It's always the left who come out here and they want to tell us what we should put on here, what Black people should be able to consume, what information Black people need. And it's like, what?
No, this is really a thing. And honestly, looking at political analysts that speak on it at a national scale, this is something that is very alive and well in America. When we talk about the characteristic of a Karen, right? I mean, really, it's like, I care so much.
Karen
I'm so hurt.
Obama.
I'm so hurt by the way that Black people are being treated in this country that I'm going to do my job with it. But honestly, that white savior, that same, we've talked about these kind of characteristics before. And ultimately, so many of those people that would have voted for Barack a third term if they could, all of that is really, it really is a characteristic that we do have to deal with, man.
That was the one big difference in going to college down south, down in North Carolina, and having so much family down there. You really definitely know where people stand. Yeah. Like, it's 100%. You know, it's sometimes it's overly overt, but you know, it's hardly ever covert. You know where people stand about stuff. But it's here, man, in Seattle, Pacific Northwest, man, it's crazy because it's institutionalized and all systemic. And I'm telling you, the same people as somebody right now, they got a Kamala Harris t-shirt on. And you know what I'm saying? Girl power, this and that. It's like in the bigger picture, their best interests, they'll say that their best interests are our best interests, but it's not. Their best interests are their best interests.
Right.
You know, and a lot of times it's just like this trauma porn, we call it right now, because of all the protest stuff. And before that, we were talking about gentrification porn, where people come and they take the pain, you know what I'm saying, and find a way to be able to like rub with it. You know what I'm saying?
No real changes made.
Yeah, no, I mean it's crazy, and that's also why we're real whatchamacallit on our footage. We don't put anything out there because we've seen organizations, nonprofits, who weren't involved in anything in the Seattle protests, go and get some footage from a few other places. And then they go do a fundraiser, and man, they're bringing big dough. You see what I'm saying? Like, man, we struggling over here with the 2s and 3s, with the 5s and 10s. You know what I'm saying? And because other people are part of this bigger machine, they're able to take the pain of the protest and really profit on it.
Man.
And you know, and not impact no policy, not impact anything like that. Like, we've seen it, and it's crazy. The people on the street level, you know, you're still struggling.
Absolutely. And this is something that we've talked about even in the nonprofit sector often, because, you know, even nationally, there's this factor of the nonprofit industrial complex, right? There's always been, you put the kids that are in from the inner city on your flyer, you know, you help a few of them a year, you know, you're letting your funders know that this is where the heart of our work is at, with a fully white-led organization, no diversity at the top. We have seen this time and time again. And what you're talking about is actually those same people that benefit from that system. And ultimately, they don't really want, you know, those of you who are from the community being in leadership positions. That's really the case.
Let me tell you something. Do you know how many people I talk to, writers, filmmakers, this and that, who are so disappointed because I don't have the story of, man, you know, I was struggling as a youth. My mama wasn't there. My dad was whatever. You know, they be waiting for that story of like dysfunctionality. Man, I never know who my daddy was, but I struggled my way up through media and this and that. When I tell them, I was like, no, man, both of my parents are this and that. And it's amazing this and that. And I had a fantastic childhood. And I went to James A. Garfield High School. Excuse me. And they disappointed because they looking for that. They looking for that story of Black struggle and survival. And man, then Omari clawed his way up and now there's converged. No, I grew up in an amazing neighborhood that supported me every step of the way. Still in touch with my elementary school teacher. You know what I'm saying? Went to a Black college that pushed me along the way, and a community that supports me. But I'm sorry, excuse me. I bump into these people and they want to talk to me, and they're so disappointed that I don't have that poor Black kid experience.
Man, trust me, this is what we call, and we know it in media straight up all the time, as real clickbait. This is what it's about. I mean, we saw that, and that's why we had to do a clapback basically right here in the studio on Converge to say, no, we know who our audience is. We know why we shape the messages the way that we do. And ultimately, again, we're not going to be able to give you that kind of clickbait, right? It's not about that. We are true to who we are. Me and O came from 2-parent household, okay? No issues there. And ultimately, you're absolutely right that when folks are looking for something, it's because they already come to you with that intention in mind. They don't really want to just hear what it is. They're trying to make sure that they can shape it in a way that they can get that headline, that they can get that quote from you, that then they spread out everywhere. That's what it is, man. And enough with that, man. That stuff is not going to work in 2021.
It's funny that the Seattle progressive chattering class. Let me find this one more time and put this up here. It's worth reading there at the Crosscut, because it's something that's, you know, this real. And I think that, you know, Seattle is full of so many well-intended people. Yeah. We're a city that gives. We're a city that traditionally wants to do the right thing and some everything else. But we also need to understand that we're also living in a city where this larger, I guess you say, progressive machine, they already got their agenda and everything else. You know what I'm saying? This is, you know, where we can fit in, we fit in. But, you know, we would be fooling ourselves if we were to sit here and think that the big progressive machine is all, about black X, Y, and Z, because it's not. And when we can benefit what they want to achieve, you see what I'm saying? Do you know how many? So let me give you an example. There's a lot of special interest groups that was just waiting. They got their special interest. They were waiting. Like how the streets are closed right now, right? Mm-hmm. There was a special interest group that's been wanting to close the streets for a long time. But then COVID popped up and it presented an opportunity because, here's an opportunity. Now, separate from them, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of other organizations that have their own agenda. And now it's like, there's an issue with the black people. Let's see how we can use that to push our bigger agenda. Now, at the same time, of course, they come arms wide open and everything else. But we shouldn't mistake that into being that their interest was always our interest.
Absolutely not. And I think that really what we're really showcasing is that folks really are coming into things with a more critical eye. I think when you think about, where help comes from and how folks want to be involved, that is something that's important for a lot of these folks that are really working toward real equity, real justice for folks, liberation for folks, to end this oppressive system. Ultimately, it is time to be looking at everything with a critical eye, because we see how things happen right here in our city. And we know it's not just in Seattle. This is really something that we have seen nationwide. So we definitely got to be on it, though.
Already knowing. So we were going to talk about, he passed back in December 29th, but Judge Charles V. Johnson, the icon, but we want to give that his just due. So we're gonna talk about Judge Johnson tomorrow. Before I get out of here, this is a clip, only a minute and a half, and this is maybe the second or third time we played this one. We got a photographer in the room, I'm sure appreciate it. But it's this clip that we played originally back in Studio B from National Geographic, and it's a reel from a black town in Oklahoma, way back in the 20s. And I play this one because we always want to lead the show in a positive way. But I play this and people can see it was 100 years ago. It was black cities, black towns, thriving, economic drivers and everything else. So when you talk about these things, it's not make believe.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And black economic independence isn't something that's make believe. It's been there before. And left uninterrupted, you know what I'm saying, would probably still be thriving.
Absolutely.
Clip right here from National Geographic.
And Oklahoma is a unique space in terms of the number of African-American towns that were established. Some suggest upwards of 50 African-American towns. Between 1924 and 1928, Reverend S.S. Jones was going around documenting this sort of self-determined, vibrant African-American communities. You see the African-American educators, doctors, lawyers, landowners, oil barons. And I think that's what's so remarkable about this footage, to think that individuals, how many years out of slavery, are now owning oil wells that are producing 2,000 barrels a day. Is that not the ultimate American dream? Is that not the ultimate American story? It flies in the face of what I think some people consider part of African American history and culture. And I think that was one of the things that Oklahoma and what S.S. Jones is really kind of showing, is that African American history and culture is not a monolith. And in a way, it became kind of like a marketing tool to encourage individuals to migrate, to move there, that this is a place where you can live, you can thrive, and peacefully reside. There were still palpable racial tensions. There are lynchings, there's Jim Crow, segregation, there's all of these things, and you still have an African-American community, or many communities, that really speak to the fortitude and resilience of Black people in this country.
I know that one's always a favorite of yours.
You already know. Like I just said to O, anytime we can show that clip, we should, because honestly, it is about the remembrance of that resilience. We talk about it in multiple forms, but that right there, for me, the actual towns themselves is almost like the epitome of what it looks like, what we're talking about now. And really, I have so much more to say about it, but I'll just say I love every time we can show that clip to remind all of us out there what we're really talking about here and bringing equity to folks who now have been erased from that. It's really about pulling ourselves up. We're doing it, man.
Yeah, and you know, it's important for us to see first and foremost, but it's also important for other people to see. Like, so when we talk about these things, other people can see like, oh, okay, these are things. I mean, and we talk about right here in the Central District. I see Stephanie Johnson Tolliver, SJT in the comments. And, you know, although it wasn't a whole city, it was a neighborhood, but you'll find that the Central District and the Black population here in Seattle were thriving in place, you know, with businesses and their own philanthropy and their own schools. I mean, it goes on and on. We definitely have a history here of excellence that we're steadily trying to reclaim.
That's right. And honestly, you know, when I listen to someone like a Dr. Maxine Mims, who's 92 years old, going on 93, when you hear someone like that say, look, you know, we really paved the way for y'all here. There was a lot of effort and a lot of energy that was put into that. And we all stand on the shoulders of that. Like you just said, I love having that connection to SJT because we can constantly learn about how the CD showcased those very elements that we just showed in that clip.
All right, we're going to get out of here. It's going to be a big news day tomorrow. Of course, the election results out of Georgia. We'll see what's happening there in Washington, D.C. Also, tomorrow we'll have the coronavirus show at 6:15 p.m. Before I get out of here, just want to acknowledge, you know, my mom, she says that Buddha says that sorrow follows joy and joy follows sorrow. And yesterday was my mom's 75th birthday. And today, we marked, it's been 16 years since my oldest brother Hiram left us. And so it's like, you know, with us here in our family, we've got the day of joy and the day of sorrow. So just remembering my brother Hiram 16 years later, you know, is still with us in every way.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're going to get out of here until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing. Earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song